Hey everyone, welcome back. It's Molly. Today we're going to be making Boston baked beans. This recipe is from the 1944 edition of the Women's Home Companion. As usual, I will put the recipe down below in the description box, and I'll make sure I'll include any modifications that I make to it. Make sure you stay tuned through the whole show so you can see how I adapt this vintage recipe to modern kitchens, and most importantly, you'll see the taste test. Let's get started. So I started this recipe last night. I took about 2 pounds of dry navy beans and I just left them on the counter to soak in some cold water. So it's 6:30 in the morning and I soaked my 2 pounds of navy beans in water last night. I covered them with several inches of cold water and they soaked up quite a bit. So what I need to do now is I need to drain these. I've got a lot of beans. Drain them as best I can and then cover them with fresh water. Oh my gosh, I should have this recipe. I'm gonna cover them with fresh cold water. So it says simmer on low heat for 2 to 3 hours or until the skins burst when tested. So it said you can also put a piece of salt pork in here. I do have salt pork, but I'm going to save that later when we actually start like putting the other ingredients in and cooking it. Hi, Dolly. I know you heard salt pork. That's not good for kitties. Okay, stop getting into the cupboards, please. Oh, do you want to say hi to the camera? Do you want to say hi? Show everybody your pretty tabby face. He heard salt pork and he's like, I want some of that. No, you're pretty cute. As you can see, my beans are soft. I had to add some extra water to this and I think I added a little too much, which will be okay. Okay, so the beans are soft and they've been cooking away for a couple hours. It's time to add the sauce to this. So it is a ½ cup of molasses and I'm using full flavored unsulfured molasses, but you could use whatever molasses you prefer. It says 2 to 4 tablespoons of brown sugar. I'm going to use 4 tablespoons because we have a lot of beans. And then 1 teaspoon of dry mustard. It says to add a tablespoon of salt, but I've never used salt pork before, and I'm assuming there's salt in this salt pork. Yeah, there's a lot of sodium in here, so I don't want it to be too salty, so I think I'm going to hold off on adding any more salt until the beans are done, and I've had a chance to taste them and to see how much more salt they'll need. So it says to add 1 cup of boiling water to this, and since I had to add extra water to the beans while they were cooking, I'm going to take some of the boiling water out of the pot and mix it in with this. Oops. I hope this is enough sauce for these beans. These are a lot of beans and I don't know if this is going to be enough flavoring for them. It doesn't look like very much. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is we need to add our salt pork. So it's time to add the salt pork to the beans. Basically it says you can use anywhere from a ½ pound to 3/4 pound. I have a 1 pound piece, so I'm just going to cut this in half and freeze the other half. If you can't find salt pork or you don't want to go buy it, you can go ahead and use bacon. I mean, I don't see why you couldn't use bacon. I would just use the equivalent amount of bacon. So here is my 1 pound piece of salt pork, and I'm just going to cut it in half, and I think just give it a rough chop. So I'm going to freeze. Apparently I need to sharpen my knife. So I'm going to freeze 1/2, and it says to scrape rind of salt pork and cut gashes into fat ½ inch apart. So I'm assuming this side is what they're referring to as the rind. Scrape rind of salt pork. I wonder why they mean for you to do that. I've never used salt pork before, so scrape rind of salt pork. I don't know what they mean by scrape the rind. I mean, I don't see what scraping it with a knife would do. Cut gashes into fat. So you're going to stick this piece of salt pork meat this side down into the beans and leaving this side out. So it makes sense to me to cut gashes and this end so that, you know, the juices can get up in there, the bean juices. I may not be doing this right. If you guys think I'm doing this wrong, please tell me, because I don't want to look like an idiot. All right, that's good enough. So basically we just stick this in the beans. Said to leave the rind exposed. It's kind of exposed. Recipe now says to cover the pot and bake it in a slow oven, 250 degrees Fahrenheit to 275 degrees Fahrenheit for 6 to 8 hours, adding more water as needed to keep beans moist. Remove cover for last half hour of baking, and then it makes about 12 servings. So Dan is with me to test out the beans. They've been cooking for several hours, and the salt pork is in here. All right, Dan, you ready? I wanted to know, I added a half tablespoon of salt. So we'll see.
Those are pretty good beans.
You think so?
Yeah.
I think they're a little bland.
They are a little bland, but I mean, they're good.
They're not bad. They've got good flavor. They just don't have enough flavor, at least not for me. I like a lot of flavor. But I mean, when I saw the proportions in here, I was kind of curious. I was like, first off, I'm like, 2 pounds of beans isn't that much. And then I started cooking. I'm like, oh my God, this is a lot of beans. And then I was looking at how much of the other ingredients: tablespoon of salt, 2 to 4 tablespoons of brown sugar, a half cup of molasses, and a teaspoon of mustard, and then a chunk of salt pork. I'm like, that's not a whole lot. Like, and then you taste it, and it tastes good. It's just not very flavorful. Not what I'm used to. I'm used to like baked beans that have got a lot of flavor. And
Bush's baked beans.
Yeah, and I'm like, what is going on here? And then I'm like, idiot, this was revised or copyrighted again around 1944. So when this book was being published or being sent out, World War II was going on. There was sugar rationing. So a lot of foods were rationed. And so that makes sense that, you know what, they probably were being very careful with the amounts of rationed food that they were putting into recipes. So it's probably because of rationing, which makes sense. And it's good. It's definitely good. I would like a little more flavor, and since we have so much of this, and I would like a little more flavor, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another 4 tablespoons of brown sugar. I'm going to add another half cup of molasses, and I'm going to add another teaspoon of dry mustard, because we live in an age of excess.
What about?
I can do that.
What about like cayenne pepper or something to like heat it up a little?
I could put in a little cayenne pepper.
Or something just to give it a little bit more heat.
You want a little more heat?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm going to add probably some cayenne pepper. I'll put whatever modifications I do in the description box, but Dan wants some heat. Dan likes things spicy. In case you hadn't noticed, Dan's a spicy kind of guy. Whoa. So I'm going to, you know, and I think with this, like the recipe said, just keep checking and make sure you have enough moisture in there, like enough water so it doesn't burn, because that would be very bad. But kind of like the longer you cook it, you know, the better it gets, so up to a point. So I'm going to make another round of sauce. I'm going to toss it in here. I don't think I'm going to put any more boiling water in though. And I'm not adding any more salt pork, because I think I'm just going to let this chunk float around in here and do its thing. The rind is no longer exposed. It's totally submerged. I think it's going to be all right.
Yeah.
And I'm surprised that it didn't leach out as much salt as I had expected. The one thing I'm not going to double the salt. I added a half tablespoon. I think that's a decent amount. There's going to be sodium in the other stuff I'm about to add to this, so I'm going to really make sure that I not overdo it with the salt. We can always add more. So, all right, we're going to do another taste test after I add the other things, and then we'll let you guys know how it turns out.
See y'all later.
Hey, we're back. So I added extra sauce to the beans, and I added a half teaspoon of cayenne pepper per Dan's request. Let's test this out.
That's a lot better.
Yeah, that's a lot better.
That's a lot better.
I think it needs a bit more salt, but
Yeah, I don't think so.
you don't think so?
No. And you know how I love my salt.
Yeah. My personal recommendation, I would add, you just ate off that spoon. Faux pas. Anyways, I would add more molasses, dry mustard, and brown sugar. Be careful with the salt. If you like it a little tiny bit of heat, add some cayenne. I think you could also add Worcestershire or Worcestershire, whatever. You could also add that to this. I think that would be really good. Onion would be good in this. Yeah, it's a good base recipe. You could add a lot of stuff to this and kind of just make it your own.
You know, so, bits of bacon would be really good cut up and put in that too.
That's what I said. I said if you didn't want to go out and buy salt pork or you can't find it, because I wasn't sure if I would be able to find it. I thought that this would really make it like extremely flavorful.
Salty.
It's salty, and not really.
Yeah, no.
I don't think it really imparted
much at all.
Yeah, I don't honestly. Okay, our opinion. We don't think the salt pork really imparted much flavor. I tasted the beans just by themselves, and I was like, I mean, maybe it did, and I can't taste it, but. Well, yeah, good. This is a good baked bean recipe if you just make it your own. It's a good place to start off. It makes a ton. So if you don't want that much, I would have or even quarter this recipe because it makes a ton. You're having this for breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Hey. I won't complain.
So there you have it. Boston baked beans circa 1944. If you like what you saw, then please subscribe and hit the like button. I post content every Wednesday and Sunday, and I hope to see you soon.
See you guys later.